Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for introducing me. Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Just fine.
I know you told her, but I got to include you. I got to bring you into the fold. Greg's right. What I want to talk to you about today might relate to the search, but it's not directly about the search. Most of what I'm going to talk about today, from my experience and even from my academic training, is why we are looking for certain things, what might be more effective for you once you understand the dynamics not only of who you are, but how that relates to other people, and ideally, in your search, not unlike wanting to do women's wear online, what is there about that makes that attractive? Now, for some of us, and I've been in your position as well, when I first moved to Virginia, I was with a network startup manufacturing company. And 9 months after I moved from Pennsylvania to Virginia, 9 months later, the company folded. So I had my wife and the twins, and we were in Virginia, in Fairfax, which is really inexpensive. Yeah, and I had all of that, and it was like, wait a minute, I just got laid off. What is going on, right? So I had that trepidation. I was frustrated. I was like, well, why did you make this decision? All of those things. And finally, I started thinking, and someone said it, introspective, started thinking about it as it related just to me, as opposed to, I need a job, whatever it is. I got to make some money, whatever it is. I got to take care of the family, whatever it is. And those things were important. But the problem that I was able to uncover is that I had a strong need for social acceptance. And so part of my inhibitions was aligned to, if you don't have a job, then what's your value? If you aren't working, what are you contributing? If you aren't interacting with somebody else and influencing their life, what are you worth? And it hindered me in my search. Because now, if I filled out 20 applications and I didn't get the call immediately, I put it out by 8 o'clock, I didn't have 15 calls. I'm good at what I do, and I don't have all of these calls. What does it say about me? And of course, at 40 plus, am I a little bit older than what they're looking for? I've been really good. Do I have too much experience? And so now it's moving me out of the market. Do I not have enough of what they're looking for? Should I stay in this field that I have been professionally aligned to for my entire life? Or should I look for something else? And all of those things started to surface. But again, once I looked introspectively and started to understand that the nature of who I was, from having grown up in a farm from North Carolina to having achieved the positions that I achieved in industry, it affected me. Sometimes made it difficult, not only for me to succeed, and we'll talk about success, but even what I was looking for. And there were two words that I really came up with that really changed my life, and I'm hoping it will help you. I'm optimistic that it will. So I'm going to ask this question very quickly, because I'm not a talking head. So guys, we're going to do some interactive stuff here. So how many of you use an alarm clock to get up in the morning? Okay, cool. You don't use one?
Okay, no.
Huh? Just don't want to get up? Or what?
No, I get up. I just wake up early.
Okay, so, and we're going to talk about conditioning as well. But why do you use the alarm clock?
Yeah, I bet I'm not.
Yeah, okay, on time. Yeah, and because what are the repercussions of that, or the implications if you don't get up on time?
Sleep till noon.
Sleep till noon, and then my schedule might get off. For those who are, I will say, OCD, you've got to get up, you've got to do A, you've got to do B, you've got to do C, and those things have to fall in line, otherwise the entire day is messed up. And what do I do with that? But one of the reasons that those of us that use an alarm clock is exactly that. We don't want our schedules to get off. And we know that if we don't get up at that particular time, it's going to be off, which is going to mess our day up. And so there are two things. And yes, I'm a nerd, so I carry one of these in my pocket. All right. But it is either a cost or it is a benefit. And everything that we talk about today is going to align to this? Is it going to be a cost or a benefit, right? And when we talk about self-awareness, because I'm really interested, I mean, most of the work that I do now academically and professionally is around self-awareness. Helping people look introspectively to figure out what it is that's making them do what they do and why they do what they do. So, as a brief background in this cost-benefit thing, I mean, I started out as a computer programmer. My first degree was computer science, and I was a programmer. Crazy guy, right? Didn't use flow charts or anything, just sat at the computer and typed 700 lines of code or more. Didn't matter because I could see it in my head. And I was like, man, you're good at this, you're good at this. And then I started working with people that gave me problems. And since they gave me problems, I was like, you know, I need to isolate myself, segregate myself. But remember, at the beginning, I said what I was a person who needed social acceptance. But you can't work alone and get social acceptance. So I had to recondition myself to figure out, well, what is it about me that aligns to this creative nature programming and this need for social acceptance? Well, turns out it's behavior and psychology of that. So I moved from programming into business and organizational behavior development, and then industrial organizational psychology. And all of this stuff started to flow. Because what I was looking at as a system, even a computing system, hardware system, IT, I've got all of these linkages between hardware and software and all of this stuff is happening. I finally realized that each of us is a human performance system. There are certain values that we have that we align that create our success. And if we've aligned to it well enough and we think it fits with our characteristics and attributes, then yes, I'm successful in what I've achieved. But as soon as we run into the frustrating parts and it doesn't work out that way because we have constructed it, now it becomes difficult for us to move forward. And I think and again, even when I at first was looking for a position, right, after the layoff, I was looking for a position, I was concerned, who am I competing with, right? I mean, I wasn't the same age, and I recall this was 20 years ago, but 20 years ago, I was looking at that and I was wondering, wait a minute, a lot of people are looking for IT professionals. Well, I'm in an IT industry, but I'm not an IT professional. I'm a behaviorist guy, right? How do I fit in? And now I've got kids, I need a check. Well, I became aligned to the check. Instead of looking for what was going to benefit me and give me the value of what I was able to create. What was going to be my contribution, not only for them, but for me. And this cost benefit thing, as we talk about it today, it's not just professional, it's also personal. Because Greg and I were talking about it earlier. I don't know of anyone who can be very happy at home and not be happy going somewhere else. It changes your attitude, even if you're searching for jobs. If you're happy about it, it doesn't become tedious, right? It may be repetitive, but it's not tedious because now there's value to the contribution that you're making to look for it. There's a benefit to it. Rather than opposed to, man, I've already filled out 10 of these things. Yeah, do I have to do another one? Nobody's calling me. There's a cost associated with it. Now I stopped doing it. I stopped looking at it. Right? I'll just do one because I'm not getting the callbacks. They're not looking at my resume. Obviously, they can't see how great I am, so what's the problem? And those are the kind of things I want to talk about today because it really is how you structure yourself for your search. For your search. How you structure yourself for your search. Are you looking just for a job or are you looking for a career? Are you looking to be happy in that search? Or are you simply looking to be satisfied because there's a gap and you conditioned yourself that the only way that you structure value is by having a role, is by getting a job and getting a check, right? I know now, hindsight being 2020, I know that the last private position that I had, I should have left after 2 years. I was in the role and I considered myself good. Very good. I mean, I won't use the word exceptional, but I mean, around behavior, it's stuff I breathe. I mean, I wake up in the morning thinking what I can change tomorrow and how I can define it. And so for me, I went into this organization, and of course, I came from the outside. I said, I want to change the world. I want to change the way that you do leadership development. I want to change the way that you do training, and I'm capable of doing it. So let me at it. Well, The response was, oh, so you're better than us. Oh, you don't think that we're capable of it. Oh, because you came from the outside, you know more, you're smarter than us. No, I wasn't. It was just my nature, right? Social acceptance. I needed to feel like I was contributing, so I was socially accepted. What I had to learn was increments sometimes change behavior, and if you condition people to believe that you are now contributing as opposed to trying to overshadow them, it's different. Think of it when you go in an interview. When you go in an interview, if you go into an interview and your precept is that I need a job, you condition yourself to provide answers that you think they want. And then you end up getting the job for something that you didn't want. Because it didn't necessarily make you happy, you provided answers for what you thought they wanted instead of what was going to contribute and allow you to add value to the position that you got. And the number of people who spend 30 years at a job or whatever number that you have, and then every night after they've done this remarkable work, then they go home and drink. Because that's the only comfort. They had to deal with that environment for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, whatever it was, and not finding the value to themselves, simply to what they were contributing to hold a check. And guys, I'm not naive. I understand checks have value as well, right? We have things that we need to take care of. But the longevity of that I have found, and it's not 100% because I don't believe anything is, unless you're an engineer, you know, when all of the expressions are always the same. But in the outside of that, there's always a growth potential. And that's going to be as a result, more evident as a result of what you feel about what you do. Your own self-awareness. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Okay? We'll involve some conditioning, some classical conditioning, operant conditioning. We'll talk about those things. But again, as it relates to who you are and what you're looking to achieve and why you want to achieve it. There are three things that I will cover today other than this cost benefit that I will relate to it, but it's what you were, what you were expected to be, and who you really are.
What's the
Now,
last one?
who you are.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Adaptability. All right. So as we look at this, so as we go through this, this is exactly what we're talking about. And I will assume that this works, even though I may be challenged. But I heard that there were two or three IT people, so I can get some help. All right, so this should work. So this is what I want to talk about, right? This construct of personality, the lifespan, is going to have a cost-benefit analysis to it. And it's going to be structured by what you're currently trying to do. Even in your job search, even in your interaction, even in the jobs if you currently have one, even in your relationships with those at home as well as at work, it's going to apply. And if you're familiar with Dr. Bruce Lipton, he has been, over the last few years, talking about how we can reprogram ourselves based on the first 6 or 7 years of our lives. Ooh, I got the look. That's a good look. I like that look. So now we can really get into it. But the idea is that at some point in our lives, the way that we were conditioned, right? And if you remember Pavlov started with the dog as a classical conditioning. They said, every time I put food out, the dog would come and get the food. But more importantly, they noticed that every time they put food out, the dog would salivate. Because food naturally creates in us animals salivation, right? The natural state. And he said, well, if I can associate this bell with the food, then when I ring the bell, the dog will still salivate. Because the idea is still that I will get food as a result of this. Well, we have been classically conditioned naturally, either through genetics or through nurture, as a result of our first years of life. Now, I think that's 0 to 5, and we're going to talk about it. Dr. Lipton was the effective founder of stem cell research. So the dude's got a few more brain cells than I do. But I still have an opinion, so I'm going to share that with you guys today. So from 0 to 5, how you were programmed affects how you look at things today. It affects how you do your job search. It affects how you have interactions with others. And all of that started as a stem at the very beginning from 0 to 5. So we'll talk about that. And then after that, what did the transition, what were the impacts and the effects that have now structured you to be the person that you are today, or the person that you think you're supposed to be? Question, at what age do you think that our personalities become static, fixed, don't change anymore? There's one instance, but outside of that, when our personalities become fixed, what age do you think?
When we die.
When we die? Okay, well, that's true. Yeah, once you start pushing up daisies, and you got it. Well, let's go a little bit before that. All right. So, what do you think? Come on, guys. I told you this is not going to be a talking head. 10? 8? Okay, 8, 10?
18.
5? 15? You said 15 or 18?
18.
18? Okay. 40? Ooh, really optimistic. Say you did it because it's 40 plus, right?
No.
Okay, I got it. Okay. Think 19.
Right there.
Yeah, you were so close.
I was right there.
Yes.
25 for males, 19 for females.
19 for everybody,
Really?
plus or
Yeah,
minus 1 or
seriously.
2 years. And right now, one of the things, and I won't go far into it, but for all humans predominantly, and not just males but females, but the age of 25 is when our prefrontal cortex fully matures. And so at that point, most of who we are is defined, but around 19, you've pretty much defined your core constructs for making decisions. And so that's where I wanted to take you through. Because for me, I didn't understand, and I'll share with you guys, I grew up on a farm in North Carolina. And I grew up in the late 60s, 70s, right? So then that was the integration period. And during the integration period, there were a lot of things that I couldn't do simply because of who I was. You know, and I didn't understand the dynamics of that as it affected my personality till later in life. I didn't understand how it impacted me that I was, you know, at some point as a child, couldn't go through the front door of a restaurant, had to go to the back and order but pay the same price. Right? Some places I couldn't go into because, and I'm not saying that to cast any aspersions, that's the way that it was. Unfortunately, it's changed. But what I found out when I did that introspection, what I found out was, as a result of that growth, 0 to 5 and then 6 to 12, you couldn't tell me what to do. And so I got 4 degrees because I'm going to be academically strong. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I know it, son. I can give you theory, I can give you application, I can give whatever you want, whatever you need for me to validate that I know what I'm doing. Well, think about that in an interactive group when you have a manager or director or vice president or supervisor who says, yeah, I want you to do it this way. Really? Really? You want me to do it that way? Well, let me help you understand what would be a better way, right? Some people don't like that. And since some people don't like that, in some instances, it hindered my ability for growth. Because they were saying, oh, not a team player. Oh, he doesn't listen to others. Oh, it's always got to be his way. Right? Until I learned that, there was a part of my career that was stymied. And I was doing it subconsciously. Because for me, I was reliving 0 to 5. And so no matter what environment I was in, I pushed back. And I didn't realize that I was pushing back until I was able to see that part of my core construct was affecting my ability to accept someone else's opinions. And even to accept that I didn't have to be right. I just had to make it work. And that was the difference. So this personality construct, we'll talk about behavior. What happens after that? What drives our behaviors? And when we talk about the personality thing, you're going to see some of that. Cognitive and analytic conditioning, because we are conditioned, folks. No matter how we would like to say that we are our own person or our own said group, we are conditioned by the things around us. And unless you are a hermit, you know, and the only thing that, and you slept till 12 and then decided I was going to sleep 24 more hours, right? You are interacting with someone, and it affects your ability. Because now that interaction, and we'll see an equation that I've developed, and we'll talk about that as well. And then how do we make decisions? How do I make a decision about what it is I want? For those of us who are, well, I'm putting my 20 years ago into this, but when you're looking for a position, if you allow the construct of getting a job and a salary to offset what is of value to you beyond that, then you accept what's offered. I remember when I was looking, and I was like, well, look, I just want to make, this amount. I don't care what just get me that amount. And I diminished my value. Because it says, I'm worth more up here. I'm worth more, but I'm willing to accept this because I've defined that this is what I need in order to create value and get social acceptance. But I had to understand that about me. The difference is, and you've heard this before, it's easier to get a job when you have one. Well, the only reason is you negotiate differently, right? Because now you have, so now it's like, well, I'll negotiate on my value, not on what somebody thinks I'm worth. It's a different precept, right? And then you can ask me any questions. Matter of fact, you can ask me questions during the presentation because I don't have an ego to satisfy. And I don't want to pass something that if you have a question, that you think is pertinent to whatever we're discussing, please just stop me then, right? Because they've given me this time. Thank you. So since they've given me this time, I can stretch it, not beyond, but within it, I can play with it the way that I want. Okay, so we're good? All right, so back to cost benefit. So using the alarm clock. Using the alarm clock, you got it because there was a benefit to getting up and being on time. Starting my day the way that I'm used to starting my day. Doing the things and having the window of opportunity to do those things within the time construct that I've already created, right? The cost is being late. The cost is not being where I'm supposed to be. The cost is not doing the things that I want to do, right? So we use an alarm clock. Here's a question. Any of you wonderful folks who use an alarm clock hit the snooze button?
At least 10 times.
All right. Change dynamic, right? For those who religiously do it, nope, can't do that because if I do that, it's going to shift everything. But for some, it's like, you know what? I usually get up an hour early. When I can make it in 50 minutes today. I can do it in 30. So we shift this. We shift the cost benefit. The benefit was to get up on time. But then when I felt tired, the benefit was to stay asleep. Cost was getting up. So every decision that you make from the time that you wake up to the time that you go to sleep has a cost benefit analysis associated with it. You're going to make a decision, and as we know, when we're born, we start at 50-50 or 0-0, however you want to work that. But after that, nothing else is even. We aren't even anymore. Because if you make a decision toward benefit, costs can't be equal. Because one of the things that we do know psychologically is that costs are things that we avoid. If I put a higher cost to something than the benefit that I will receive as a result of it, I will avoid it. Even back to filling out resumes or filling out applications, all of those. If you think that the amount of time that you have to do that is greater than because you're not getting the callbacks that you want, at some point you start looking, I'm tired of putting in resume applications. I'm not getting the callbacks that I want. So I'll do one or two. If I go in and I have a conversation with someone and it seems like everything they're asking me is trying to screw me up, then I withdraw. They don't really want me. They're not the person I'm looking for. It's the age, it's the gender, it's the sex, whatever it is. But if there's a benefit, go in smiling, willing to answer the questions, and tell them exactly why I'm the best person that they should have. Now, I don't make the decision, but I can leverage that. I can start to talk about it. So here's where we go into the lifespan. And again, you got to stop me whenever you want. This is my idea, and based on some research that I've done over the last year, this helps us get to that personality construct. And then I'll define that further, because around age of 19, plus or minus 1 or 2 years, this defines how we will ultimately make our decisions and what we will search for. Even defines who we are expected to be and who we think we are. Now, also based on most of the research that I've done, around 80% of adult persons don't know who they are. You have an idea. You have an idea because most of us fit within the environment that will satisfy our needs. So you'll go to work for 30 years or 20 years or 10 years or whatever it is, and the organizational culture will then define who you become. Oh, I have to do it this way because that's the way that I fit in with the people around me. You think about it, even in some of your personal relationships, sometimes it's, oh, well, they are this way, and I like the group, so I'm going to fit in by doing this their way. And as a result, you end up going through this period when, again, at the end of the day, or the end of that career, you finally say, you know what, I can finally do what I want to do in life. But you've spent all of this other time. So I think even in your search, one of the things that should happen is defining who you are. What is it that you're trying to achieve? On most of your resumes, I'd be willing to bet, and I don't have a lot of juice, so it's going to be small amounts, but I'd be willing to bet that on your resumes, it says what you are, not who you are. I'm a manager. I'm an IT professional. I'm a guru, as Fred said. And I'm making it up, Fred, but I know there's another word, but it came out guru in my head. All right, but you put what you were, and that's how people define you. Oh, if they're a manager, then they're ready for the next level. It doesn't mean that you couldn't go in, and I'm making it up, as a vice president. You may have the skills and abilities and the capabilities and potential to be at this higher level, but they're defining it by what you've told them you were. And most often, the only time that we put something on a resume that says who we are is the objective. And then everything else is about, I was a plant manager, I was this, I was a marketing manager, I was an advertiser, I was an IT specialist, I was an IT director, whatever it was. Right? We define by what we are, and then we're confused by people compare us and make judgments about us based on what we were. Right? Yes, ma'am.
So earlier you were talking about how your leadership style, whatever, was signing your career, meaning that you were just full force ahead and so forth. But then now you've talked about how people have done the opposite, which is fitting themselves into the group. So it seems like, where is the equilibrium? Because it's like you're going to lose if you stay true to yourself, which is what you did, and you stymied your career because you did stay true to who you are. But then if you go and you fit yourself into the mold of the workplace or the environment or the industry that you're working in, and it's not necessarily what you are, then you end up 30 years lost and miserable.
Yeah. I don't normally do this because in most training things, everything is a great question. That one was, but I don't like to make that so prescriptive that everything you ask, oh, did you grow up here? Oh, that's a great question. Let me answer that. I don't want to do that. There's a medium. There's a benefit, right? Back to cost benefit. What I had to realize was how much of myself was driving my success and how much of myself was hindering my success, right? And then I had to do an assessment. What is it costing me? If it's costing me my ability to move forward, if that's what I want to achieve, then what am I willing to negotiate and to say, this is not worth me fighting for? You know that old adage, losing the battle but winning the war? Well, I had to define that this was the war. Some of those were battles that weren't worth fighting. And no matter what the construct of my personality was, if I could shift that and negotiate it to see what the outcome would be that was beneficial to them and to me, it was easier then to back away and say, you know what, this isn't worth winning because I can do it in such a way that I still add value without it having to be all of mine. So there is, and with negotiation, like with anything else, remember, it's going to be, if someone is getting nothing and somebody else is getting 100%, you're probably not going to agree. But even in negotiating in an interview, people ask you questions that are important to them. Well, what kind of answers do you give that will add benefit to them, but also add benefit to you if you get the job? So I think that's the partial response. And so very quickly, where I see this fitting in is again about self-awareness and knowing who you are is here. Because from 0 to 6, my numbers, from 0 to 6, as Dr. Lipton says, we are simply mirrors of behavior. Your prefrontal cortex is just starting to develop. You don't have the ability to think in an abstract way until later on in life, maybe around the age of 4 and 5. But until then, most of it is simply as a mirror. You see mom smile, you smile. Now, there's some things that are innate, but if you see mom happy or dad mad, then we associate the things that they're doing with what is good or bad for us because we don't know the difference. In the absence of experience, we don't know. So I can't make a decision about that. But around the age of 6, what I start doing then, if I go to the first grade or something like that, I start interacting with other kids. I couldn't have, and I'm making it up, but I couldn't have ice cream after a certain time at night. Or you couldn't have ice cream because it made you hyper during the day. But kids are coming in and they're doing that. They've got ice cream and cookies and all of that stuff and they're okay. So what's the problem? So now I start to use judgments here, absolute trust. Absolute trust. So for me, my parents held us to this construct in North Carolina that said, because of these particular things, here is who you are and here's what you're capable of doing, here's what you're allowed to do, right? That became, I watched them and that became the construct of how I interacted with others. And I thought that was the norm until I got into grade school. Once I got into grade school, I started kids doing different things. So now there was explicit trust still in parents, but there became implicit trust with those kids who were doing things differently. And so now I started questioning a little bit, but I'm still afraid of my parents. So I might question, but I'm not going to do a whole lot against it. But I also want to fit in with the clique and the friends. So now the friends also have some input on what I develop now as a norm. And so all of this happens, and it continues to happen until that biological shift between us going from child to young adult at 13 years old, right? And around then, now we start to challenge the truth. My dad was not a big drinker, but if he had 2 beers, he was dancing all over everywhere. I mean, he was a cheap date. He structured us, don't drink, right? Because drinking leads to bad things. And I followed his instructions, to the letter until I was 17. And at 17, I came to DC, and I got to DC. My 2 older brothers were living in DC. They were having a party. I go to the party. They're having screwdrivers. I have a drink. And, orange juice and vodka. Well, of course, all I tasted was orange juice. And so, as an adult, 17-year-old adult, give me another one, And so I end up waking in the bathroom the next day in the second bedroom because I passed out. I didn't know the difference, but I was challenging all the things that I believed. And I said, oh, he's right about that one. Other things I challenged, oh, he's not right about that because it doesn't fit with what I want to be or who I am. So around this point, that convergence into self said that here are my foundational constructs. Here's what I believe morally, ethically, spiritually, right? Here are the things that I believe. Now, based on my own challenges and what I've seen to be true or false. And based on that, I now believe that these are the core constructs. These are the things that are really important to me. And so primarily for the rest of my life, I will use those to make my decisions. If I have the spiritual belief, if I have morals and ethics, now, I may go against them sometimes, but the majority of the time, I'm going to look at those and say, these are the basis for my decisions. And that becomes what you expect it to be. Because it was based on all of these other constructs. And now you added them together and trying to define out, well, what are the things that have value to me? Who am I? What are the real constructs that define who I am? Before, what you were was defined by looking externally. Somebody else had input into who you were. Then what you expected to be based on the interaction that you had with other people, the other kids, the other teenagers, the other television, today even more so, and the social media. And then, defining who I was, but then I go into a work environment and they don't allow me to do that. And so I transition and I change to be the person that will fit to satisfy the needs, which is to have a position and or a check. Again, this is not a gambling class, but I'm willing to bet a little bit that for those who have been in a job search for a month, you're starting to look at other positions and say, well, this was close enough. I should fill out for this one. Because I've only been looking into marketing, or I've only been looking in IT, and I've only been looking in those, and I'm not getting the responses that I want. But maybe I should bridge it. This has got a little IT in it. This has got a little marketing. This has got a little HR in it, right? So maybe I'll go out there. So you start to broaden your perspective, because now part of this reverts back to, well, when I was going through all of this, The thing I was taught is that in order to add value, you need to contribute. Well, the way that I contribute is doing this, is doing that. And I start to diminish all of who I am based on those constructs because I need to satisfy this larger good. And the larger good is what people expect of me. And if I accept that, then I become what they expect. And sometimes I'll neglect the other things about what I really need in order to be successful, to get back into the workforce and contribute. Or, and I'm not against it, folks, but some are saying, you know what, look, I'd love to be who I am, but give me the job and give me the check and let me move forward, and then I'll look for things after I've achieved that. And I get it, right? But for me, the idea has always been, after I was able to find out who I really was, I started looking for positions that allowed me to flourish. I started looking for managers who, I'll say, weren't intimidated, right, by the things that I knew, and were very supportive. I worked for some incredible managers who had no idea. One guy literally told me, and one young lady who was my manager told me, they said, look, we don't need to know psychology. We know what we're doing. We need you to know it. So you apply it to what we know, and then between the two of us, we'll have a great group. That's the idea. So if you can take that and leverage that and understanding what it is you're searching for, it changes your resume. It changes the conversation that you have. I mean, you're coming here to 40 plus for what particular reason? I mean, and I know there's opportunities and there's networking and you're looking for ways to strengthen your search. But why 40 plus? Why not at home? Why not at home searching? Right? Why not staying with just your friends? For the first month after I was laid off, I didn't go out and network, right? Because I was so certain that within that month I'd have another gig, I'd have another job. And then at some point I got to the point where it's like, well, now, how do I talk to people if I go out? How do I tell them what I'm looking for? I've been out of work for a month, right? Absolute mess. It had no basis for what I needed to do, except that's what I started thinking it was. That's what I started thinking it was. And people who are looking for a role sometimes will say, it's been so long. I don't know if you guys follow on LinkedIn, but there was one guy on LinkedIn that said he sent 1,100 applications. 1,100, but he finally got a job. He finally got one. He said, I sent out 11, and he put it on LinkedIn. After 1,100, I finally got an interview and I got the job. You know what he thought of that 1,000? 11, 1,000, what is it? 1,000. No, I got to do this in my head. 1,190. You know what he thought about those? Nothing. Right? Nothing. Right? But we create this construct in our minds that 1,100, this dude was crazy. I'd never do 1,100. What does 1,100 say about me? It doesn't say anything about you, except that you're excited about finding a position. But we start to define it as if, well, if it's taking you that long, must be something wrong, right? And then you go back to the conditioning, right? Start to condition yourself. Well, man, I'm doing too much. I'm doing something wrong. It's not worth it. It's not no value. You know, I'll just do whatever. I'll go, and I'm not downing anybody. I'll go do a part-time job at FedEx or UPS or something, right? Just to keep it going, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Matter of fact, when I got laid off, that's what I did. Because I said, until I get whatever, we were taught on a farm, you do what you can until you get what you want. And so they were hiring, I was working. But in that other period, I was looking, right? Because I didn't allow it to diminish me. And so I think this happens. And the reason I have this up here, because arithmetically, and I know you engineers are already looking at it, saying 1 plus 1, what? 1 plus 1, we know naturally is 2, right? But 1 plus 1 does not get you a position. Anybody got a thought why?
What do those ones represent?
It's just numerical. I mean, there is no underlying value to them other than what I'm going to talk about after you guess. Right? Now, behaviorally, 1 plus 1 equals 3. And I know it's counterintuitive. 1 plus 1 always equals 2, right? Here's the idea. Your interaction with someone else is dependent on the response from them and the response that you give. It's always going to create a single entity outside of the two people interacting. Because none of you, I don't believe, other than Greg, knew me before today. Now, you may not accept what I'm saying, or you may accept it. You may leverage it and put it to use, or may not. But it's as a result of us now interacting that you wouldn't have had that interaction before showing up here, and before being introduced to me, or my going through this conversation. Changes your thinking. So no matter what I have offered you, you have a value set that you have on your own. I have either changed your thinking, validated, or invalidated it. And so as a result, the outcome is greater than what the two of us provided. The greater good is not just focusing on you. The idea is to understand who you are, but then how do you interact with someone else? Because here's the truth. As if the other wasn't. But the truth is, there are 4 primary personality positions. Now, whether you've taken MBTI, Myers-Briggs, or whether you've taken DISC or the color wheel or anything like that, no matter what they do, they may have different colors for them, but there are 4 primary constructs. So you are different than the majority of the people that you interact with. And even if you are similar to them, it is going to either cause a conflict or higher levels of agreement. But the way that you interact with them defines what the outcome will be. So if I talk to you and you just want to get to the point, and as you guys can see, I don't have a problem talking, right? But you just want to get to the point. Well, what does this mean? What does this really mean? And I'm still talking about, the blue colors and the clouds. You look at me like, could you just shut up and just get to the point, right? Well, we just lost our agreement, right? As opposed to changing the construct of that conversation so that you get something that you want and I get something that I want. Conversations that you're going to have. Greg and I just happened to be talking about leadership development in one of the meetings and then ended up seeing some similarity. And from that we had a conversation, and from that conversation, here, right? What if I had not presented something that was of value to him, or in a way that was of value to him? I'd still be individual doing what I do. Greg would still be doing his work at 40 plus, and you guys would be listening to someone else, right? Well, it's the same everyday interaction you have, whether it's personal or professional. Whether it's personal or professional. The way that you interact with someone else is either going to drive their behavior toward you, or it's going to turn them against you because it's a cost benefit. If you go and interview with somebody and have conversations about how great you are and that's not what they want to hear, it's a cost to them. And they avoid you. The decision is probably not going to go in your favor. And it has nothing to do with your capability or potential. Simply that you didn't have the inability, or you didn't have the ability to showcase an agreement or negotiative state between the two that says you have value, but so do I. Let's find out what that is. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to focus whatever you said right now
Uh-huh.
to an interview.
Yeah.
4 personality types. Can we know what those are?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
this is coming? Okay.
I
And
hope, but if it
okay,
isn't, I'll make sure that it does.
Beautiful. Okay, the next part is taking this step further.
Mhm.
4 personality types, you're at an interview, and you're going to get one of those 4.
Yeah.
You can be one of those 4.
Yeah.
So this is a broad question, but in general,
Uh-huh.
how would you relate to your interviewer? Like say,
That is a great question.
wonderful. I don't think you can answer it. I know it could take all day, but
No,
you know.
I am going to.
Beautiful.
Matter of fact,
Okay.
I am going to answer, and I will do it within this time frame.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, so, yes, sir.
Well, just
And I'll incorporate both, so please go
that
ahead.
implicit agreement in an and that was my question too on the interview.
Yeah,
Wonderful, thank
What
you.
is that implicit agreement?
okay,
And does it vary between, well, it's going to vary between individuals?
that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And so one of the things I will talk about is how do you shift your communication based on what you hear, right? As a behavioral psychologist, one of the things that I have to do better than anything else that I do is listen. Because most of the information that I get from someone is not what they say, but the way that they say it. And sometimes simply the way that their bodies are telling me messages that, right, that they would never say because we don't have that relationship. So I will talk about that. And so what I will do is I'm going to go a little bit further into cognition and habit. So let's talk about this, the way that we're constructed, right? So even through a cognition, the way that we think and create habits. Most of those habits become conditioned things for us, right? So if you are used to getting up without an alarm clock or using an alarm clock, when that goes away, I know for me, I use an alarm clock during the week because I teach at one of the colleges every morning, Monday through Thursday. I teach from 8 to 9, 9:15. Well, if the alarm clock doesn't go up for some reason, I'm still up at 5, 5:30. I've conditioned my body to that. Well, we've also conditioned our values and what we expect. If we condition ourselves to believe that if we don't get a call back tomorrow, that it says something about us, it doesn't make it true. But it starts to make us believe that it is, which inhibits our ability to do the things after those days. Because that's the way we think. And you know that within 30 days, it only takes 30 days to create a habit. Well, most of you have been doing this a lot longer than 30 days. So all of the constructs are for what you believe and the habits that you've created have either stemmed to create a negative outcome for you and what your perspectives are, or they have been positive. And those of you who are more positive tend to do more things. You may even stay after this and start having interaction with folks here, because some of you said, oh, I have this position, and some folks have said that's the kind of position I'm looking for. Doesn't mean you're going to get a job, but those who are more positive and feel like the interaction will come to have some positive outcome will probably stay and do that. The ones who said, well, I got that and I got some information now, so I'm going to go in and I'll do it on my own, are looking at it differently. It doesn't make it right or wrong, it simply looks at it differently. So let's go back and talk about this personality thing, because those 4 constructs. So I'll use this one. Okay, here. And this should provide an answer for both questions. So most people, and again, no matter what test you use, are either highly results oriented, they want to get to the point. There are those who are more collaborative. Marketing, salespeople, these folks tend to be more operations driven, military. There are those who are highly creative. And there are those who are highly prescriptive. I'll do a brief definition of those, and then we'll expand it about the communication. How do I leverage that person's behavior so that I can hopefully come to agreement with him or her, or make them feel better about the interaction that I'm having? Results-oriented people, they're willing to take risks, but only calculated risks. And so they want to get to the end point. They want to get to the end. So if you're speaking with someone who says, oh, well, thank you, tell me specifically about this. Tell me how you did it, what you got out of it. Notice that a lot of the words that they're using are quantitative in nature. They're quantitative in nature because that's the way they measure success. If you give me 50 widgets today and you do 50 widgets, then you've been successful today. If you don't do 50, then you've been unsuccessful. It's a measure. What time are you going to get me that? Oh, you're going to send me your resume, and what time are you going to have it there? 1 o'clock. If it gets there at 1:15, oh, they weren't serious about it. Right? These people will also be the ones who get your resume, and at the top of it, you spell here, and you meant, I worked here, but you put H-E-A-R, they'll pick it up immediately. Oh, they aren't serious about this. They didn't even check their own resume. Why would I check it? I'll go file 13. Very results oriented, willing to take risks as long as they get what they're looking for. So if you can sell them that you're the person, if you start listening, and people will tell you this, folks, very quickly. If you hear that, then you start speaking in quantitative terms, even if you're somebody else. My success has been that I've worked on 4 or 5 contracts. I'm making it up 4 or 5 contracts, and those contracts have always been on time or ahead of schedule. You just told me you're the person I want. Yes. You make me feel better about me because I know you're going to make me look even better, right? People are collaborative. People who are collaborative tend to use more third-person pronouns because they like other people. I'm not saying the others are, enamored with people, but they like other people. They're collaborative. So they aren't the ones who say, well, I did this. That's this person. Oh, I asked you to get that to me at 5 o'clock, and you didn't. So what are you going to do? Right? what I created was a separation. I now created a competition between you and me, right? There's no buy-in. These folks won't buy in. So third person, what are we, I asked you for that. What are we going to do to fix that? What's it going to mean for us? And people who start using third person, well, and I was in an interview once, years ago, I was in an interview, and I've always been this third person kind of guy. And so I would say, well, what was your successes? Oh, my team and I, we did this, and we did this, and it's, oh, no, I don't want to know about the team, I want to know about you. Well, I had to redirect my entire conversation because I knew they weren't about this, they were about this. But had I stayed with we, they would have looked at, oh, well, he just leads people, he doesn't really get his hands into it. Redirected, just in communication, the way that I address communication. Creative people, they want to think, period. They want to think, right? How do you feel about this? What do you think about that? So I use terms that allow them to have an open conversation. Because in reality, and I'm one of these people, we can talk to a signpost. In order for us to get our point across, we have to give you a picture and all of the colors in it. This person, all they want to know that it's a rectangular frame. I don't care about the picture or the story. Matter of fact, can you just tell me what I need to hear? And then stop, right? And I'm saying, oh, no, there's some more to it. I want to tell you some more. Not today, right? And then these people are very prescriptive. Might even be at the extreme OCD. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Tell me the steps you went through in order to achieve. As soon as they say those words, I already know that they're ordered in their nature, the way that they think. So now I need to speak that way. Well, first I did this, and next I did this, and after that I did this. Or here are the ways that we went through. We went through this one, this one, this one, this one. Now, and you'll notice some people will do that because, first I think it was important that this happened, and then you'll see their fingers start to go up. They'll talk with their hands, but they'll do them in an ordered way. Or they'll get timing on the desk. All of this stuff, folks, simply is an added tool for you. That when you're having conversations with this, now if you are having troubles, hopefully you aren't, having trouble with your partners or husbands or wives, and the same thing occurs, try it with them. Try it with them. The same thing, because it's not just professional, it's also personal, right? And when I do this in a longer period, I said, if I'm driving from Virginia to Florida, these people will ask what question? Oh, no, what route? Well, yeah, they may ask what route because they only want one route. Yeah, and what time are we getting there? How long is this going to take, right? What about these people?
Well, how can we get there together?
Oh, we're going to visit family and friends along
Family,
the way.
friends, who's going to ride with me? Right. Not you, because you cause a problem.
Where are we going to eat?
Yeah, right? Creative people. Oh, are we just doing 95 or we're going to take 395, 295, 301, 506,
See the
6?
ball fly on the way.
That's right. Yeah, they got the biggest frying pan. I want to stop and I want to see that, right? And these folks, look, we're stopping at 12 o'clock. We're going to gas up at 12:30. I'm going to put some gas in. You can get your food, but be back in the car if you're not, you're left. Right? We don't mess up my timeline.
Where's my AAA trip tip?
That's right. But think about it. Your interactions, folks, it's with everybody. 1 + 1 = 3. If you want to change the dynamic of the behavior that you have with someone that you're interviewing with or speaking on the phone or living with, then you have to change the nature of what you are with respect to who they are, so that the outcome is a benefit to both. Yes, ma'am.
I spent a day with someone yesterday who's a result person, and I'm more of a creative, and it was a really bad day. I could have used this. I could have used this talk the morning before, yesterday morning before.
Now, may I ask, how did you know they were results oriented?
Oh, I've known him for a long time, and we've had some, like, conflicts and friendships. And yesterday, sometimes I'm a little more giving now, but yesterday it was just not good.
Yeah, I call it getting to zero. Getting to zero, right? You don't have to give up who you are, but you just need to adapt a little bit so that they're also getting something of who they are. Now I'm more willing to negotiate. Now I'm more willing to listen. I mean, you think about it, if you go in for an interview or you're talking to someone and you know that they are value driven, then your conversation should be about the value that you bring. how do I take these things? Matter of fact, I'm going to not skip this one, I'll incorporate it with the next one. But here, these are the 3 keys, right? And it fits in with personality construct. Because one of 3 things, people are in one of 3 categories in any organization. One of 3 categories. They're either transformative, they're translational, or they're transactional. And I'll define that, right? Transformative people tend to be at the upper echelon of the organization, right? Because their role is to be strategic in nature. They need to figure out not only how to sustain the company, but how to help the company grow. But these people tend to be the ones who are doing the work. Transactional. They're the ones generally at the lower order of the organization doing the work. Well, most of us at the bottom don't have conversations with the CEO or the COO or the Chief Human Resources Officer. We have conversations with their intermediaries, like the people in the middle, the managers, directors, VPs. So they need to translate what it is that these folks want strategically in order to communicate to these people, tell them what they need to do to make it happen. Well, if you go to an interview, or if you're talking to someone, depending on the level, I change the nature of my conversation, right? If it's a transactional conversation, then I start talking to them about how I achieve things, how I get things done, right? How I manage people, how I interact with people, how I have the difficult conversations, how I make those. If it's about translational, I talk to them how I manage up, how I interact with people at both levels to get the greatest benefit and to make them most effective. And then if it's transformative, I talk to them about my strategic outlooks, how I've changed organizations before, how I've made things happen, right? Because that's what they want to hear. And if that's the position, now all you have to do is analyze who the person is that you're talking to and what they're looking for. I had one client that I was coaching, and she was the Chief Human Resources Officer. But they thought if she didn't change a little, that ultimately they were going to have to let her go from the organization. And the problem was she was working with this Chief Financial Officer, and they just didn't get along. And she told me, she said, I don't want to be in the same room with him. I just don't, because every time we're in the room together, we have conflict. I said, okay. So we went through a couple of months, and I asked her, I said, well, where does he fit on this? Because she was very collaborative. Oh, how's the family? Your kids okay? Everything going well today? Did you got the report I asked for? You don't need to know about my kids. You got the report I asked for? So, of course, now they're just button heads. Turns out, he was very empathetic, but at some point in his career, somehow his emotional state had created a weakness, what was seen as a weakness. So he said no longer in his career was he going to be seen weak, so he disallowed emotional states to be shown. So when she would ask him about the family or something like that, oh no, that's emotion, cut that off. You got the report I want? I told her from now on, you go in, whatever report he wants, you give him that report, and you got 2 minutes. If he doesn't ask you to stay, you're out, back to your office. Within 3 months, they were going to lunch together. He made her the project leader because she started going in and giving him exactly what he needed. And then as a result of him seeing that she could conform to what he was and what he needed, then he was willing to have the conversation about personal issues. Change the dynamic of the interaction. Because she wants to stay where she was, he was going to stay where he was, and nobody was willing to come to zero. Well, you do the exact same thing when you're interacting with somebody, when you're interviewing with somebody, when you're talking to someone, networking with someone. You need to find out where they are. And you don't have to go there, but you got to ease a little bit out of who you are. And yes, I get all of these are degrees, right? So nobody is a micromanager, OCD, entrepreneur, or politician. But there are degrees of this, and you need to know where you are within that spectrum. If you can do that, because our decisions, we either have rational or irrational decisions. That's it. Right? It gets a little bit more complicated, but we don't have time for that. Right? But the idea is, and there are certain parts of our brain, even back to the prefrontal cortex, there are certain parts of our brain that we will make rational decisions. Right? And it's going to be based on one of two things, either my internal experience or my external experience. And if I believe in the external experience, then that means that it has value. I will make a decision in that favor. I mean, I get to do this speaking things because I haven't hit the lottery. If I hit that 700 million, somebody else would probably be speaking to you right now. Right? But the idea is I've seen somebody, or I know people who have won. Now, not the multi-millions, but hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've known people. So I will still, every now and then, give them $2. External experience, rational behavior, rational decision making. Well, if I trust in that experience, then that's what I will do. If you trust in yourself and your abilities, it's a different conversation with someone who's analyzing you or assessing you. As opposed to going in and being nervous about it. Oh, I really need this job. Oh, man, I hope I look good for them. I hope they like me. It changes the dynamic of the conversation. Right? Another rational decision. If I trust in my own experience and abilities, I will make a different decision about how I interact. But then, when I get really nervous, and here's the good part, when you get really nervous, that fight or flight syndrome that you've all heard about, that part of the brain that takes over, it does something significant. It tells the rest of your brain to shut down. So when you don't trust in yourself, you don't have the ability, you haven't practiced your elevator speech, you don't know what you're going to say, what you're looking for, and you get nervous, the rest of your brain starts to shut down and you start stuttering. Oh, well, wait a minute, I'll tell you what I did. Let me see, 6 years ago? No, 5, it was 4. It tells it to shut down. Because that part of the brain says, I don't care if it's a pretty bear, I just know it's a bear that can eat me. So shut down the processing and just get away. Well, you do the same thing when you're talking to people. And you'll notice some people who are very uncomfortable with others, right? All of this about your new life, your new career, whatever it is about your own level of confidence, your own level of self-awareness. Know that you contribute something of value because you are who you are and you bring to the table that. That's a different conversation, right? And so you make those decisions and keep it unemotional because emotion will take away your ability to think. And you start to define who you are. I didn't have to put any adjectives up there because you can define who that is. Know what your core construct is. And folks, your personality will remain as it is from the age of 19 plus or minus 1 or 2 years unless you go through a traumatic experience. If you go through a traumatic experience, your brain can actually rewire itself. But in the absence of that, that 19 plus or minus 2 years becomes the basis for the decisions that you make. So back to the subprogramming slide that I put up there quickly. If you don't have that level of confidence, then you've got to reprogram yourself. Because you sell you. And the other people who are going to promote you are going to do it because they believe in your confidence and your abilities. They want to get you in the door. You've got to get through there. So if you need to reprogram yourself by habitual things, doing mantras at night or in the morning, do them. If you need to talk yourself up and look in the mirror and record yourself and listen to yourself so that you can start understanding what it is you're saying, the way that you say things, the way that you change, the way that you adapt your behaviors, then do it, right? Because ultimately self-awareness is the thing that's going to sell you and will make you of value to someone else. Find their gap. Because they wouldn't be talking to you unless they had a need. So be the need. Satisfy that need. And the rest really becomes elementary, right? Because after that, now you just do what you're supposed to do to the degree that you're capable of doing it. Right? So we're close, so I'll stop there. Any questions at all?
I want to take us back to cost benefit.
Yes, please.
And that's, as you've gone through this, it's recognizing what your costs are
Yes.
versus your benefits,
Mm-hmm.
which is roughly pain and pleasure. It gives you
It
pain,
is. It is.
gives you pleasure.
Right. Yeah.
One man's pain can be another man's pleasure.
Right, and the only reason that I have shifted away from pain and pleasure is because pleasure tends to, or pain tends to be highly emotional. And so then I become more responsive and reactive than calculating. With cost benefit, I look at the variables associated with it. Because the benefit may not cause me pleasure, but it may give me greater value than the other side of the equation. So that's the only reason I've shifted those. But yeah, I mean, getting up in the morning, the benefit, right? Is the benefit of what I achieve out of this greater than the cost associated with it? Because again, cost we will avoid. My brother is currently running for congressional office in North Carolina. And he said he went in and talked to this guy, and the guy said, well, I never reviewed. And my brother said, well, wait a minute, I've got websites, flyers, blah, 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 filled out all the papers. Why don't you know who I am? And he said, and the guy was like, well, I just didn't. So they finally got to a conversation. And he called me and said, man, I was so, mad that this guy didn't know after all of this money I put into this. And I said, but you now have someone who will never forget you. Right? So yeah, bad, you can look at it that way, or you can look at the benefit of that interaction. If you looked at the cost, now you're mad at somebody, which inhibits your ability to look forward and do what you need to do. As opposed to the benefit, now anybody who asks about you with that guy, you'll know who you are. It's just how you look at it. Right? Something that I'm sorry, I agree with you, but something I say, because some of you have heard perception is reality, I absolutely don't believe that. Right? I believe perception is simply a belief that's not been substantiated through experience. Right? Because I can think that you guys aren't, don't have the go get it. It doesn't make it true. Unless I have some experience with you that validates it. But what it will do is drive your behavior. Right? If I think that about you, then that's the way that I interact with you. So your role is to be experiential. Show me exactly what the truth is, because that's what I can validate and measure. But if you simply create a perspective, as we all know, I can choose to accept that and have my own thoughts about what that means. But is that what you want? Or do you want to know exactly what I'm measuring, what I'm validating, what I'm listening to? Yes, ma'am.
One of my challenges in my employment search is with regard to the way my resume is currently structured. Because back in time, we listed chronology.
Yes. Yes.
And now they want results. They want achievements. They want quantifiable, accomplishments.
Yes.
And being in the category that doesn't think that way, that has been almost an insurmountable challenge for me. And I'm just curious, when did resumes have to be that thing that I am not?
The beauty of technology. The beauty and the chagrin of technology. Nothing against the young man in HR, but most HR people, unless they're hiring into HR, aren't professionals in the field they're hiring for.
And so we need to spell it out for them clearly?
Well, there's so many people searching now, and it's good and bad. There's so many people searching now that they're looking for keywords. And those keywords become the basis for their job description. And then even what they put on, whatever it is, the sites for jobs. And so they look for keywords. And if yours doesn't have those keywords, if I'm looking at 1,000 resumes, then you automatically get pushed to the side. The number of ones, and I told you guys, up through PhD, I have 20, 25 years of experience in leadership development and even operations. So when I was getting a letter back saying, oh, you have great experience, but we found someone more qualified, really? Yeah, who, right? But I didn't have the words. And I will say this to you, find this person. Find someone who can see it differently. Like Red Robin, see food differently. Find somebody who can look for those things. And I've done it with some folks, but it's looking at the resume and trying to quantify those things that we would normally just qualify, right? Help somebody, right? It's out of your comfort zone, so find someone that it is, so that they can restructure it for you. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's the nature of the beast. I'll close with this since we've got a minute. And I'll stay after if anyone would like to have one-on-one conversations. I had a position for an educational psychologist. The minimum criteria was a master's degree. And I had 27 resumes out of the 75 that I got that either had a GED or a high school diploma. So I went to recruiting and HR and I said, come on guys, seriously? They have to have at least a master's. Oh, well, you go through and figure that out. Yeah, I'll stop there, because you guys don't want to get me upset. But thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you.